This is a very interesting and different segment of the Women in Publishing Summit. Welcome. I am your host, Alexa Bigwharf, and I'm really excited to spend some time talking about international rights, having your book published in different countries in different languages, and also film and TV rights. So I think this is like the goal we all have, whether we realize it or not, that we want our book to be on the big screen. At least that's my goal. I want my book to be in a bunch of languages, and I want it to be a major motion picture. I mean, no small dreams here, right? So today we are talking with Eileen Cook. She's a multi-published hybrid author, which means she has some that are indie published and some that are traditional published, which is great because she can offer us insight into the whole spectrum. She has had her novels appearing in 8 languages. Her books have been optioned for film and TV. She spent most of her teen years wishing she were somewhere else or someone else, which is great training to be a writer. She's an instructor mentor with the Creative Academy and Simon Fraser University Writers Studio Program, where she loves helping other writers find their unique story to tell. She does live in Vancouver. We won't hold that against her. I'm just teasing. We have a lot of Canadians this year, so I'm excited to say that this is truly an international summit. And she has 2 very naughty dogs. So you can find her at eileencook.com and other links that we will make sure that you have available to you in the show notes. Welcome, Eileen. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm hoping my naughty dogs don't bark in the middle of this interview. I've bribed them with treats, so we'll see.
You know what? If they do, that's fine. We will just roll with the punches. But okay, so you basically are living our dreams. our dream child. You are right. You are a full-time professional author, correct? This
Correct.
Is all the time deal. I'm super jealous. And you're in languages and in different markets and on having, are they books that we would, or films or TV that we would recognize?
Probably my most popular book that you would know is With Malice, and that one made it into Entertainment Weekly and those kinds of things. So that was I had to buy every single issue of Entertainment Weekly at the grocery store. So
that's very cool. So now when you say that your books have been optioned for film and TV, have any of them made it to the screen? And what does
Not yet.
Okay, so let's talk about what that means, and then we'll get into the foreign languages and all of that stuff. What does it mean to have your book optioned?
So probably the best way to think about optioning is it's almost like someone is renting your book.
Okay.
So you will be approached, or you may approach, so we'll talk about that, someone who is in the film industry. So it might be a producer. It could be an actor, so someone who's read the book. So Reese Witherspoon reads your book and she says, I absolutely have to do this. You might be approached by a film studio that has an interest in that particular project. And what they do is option it. So what they're saying is, we need some time to see if we can pull it together. Mm-hmm. So if you think publishing is complicated, welcome to the wild and wacky world of film, where everything is up for grabs, and it is a very wild ride. It's like being on a roller coaster, because they are the most positive people that you'll talk to. So everything's going to be like, Alexa, we love it. It's amazing. It's going to be the next thing. And you're like, yes. And you're like already buying your Oscar dress. And then 2 weeks later, nobody returns your call. So it's very wild up and down. But when they option, what they do is they are giving you money to basically say, you cannot option this book to anyone else.
Okay. So you do make some money out of the process, even if it
yes,
doesn't
you
make
do.
it to the screen. Awesome.
I happen to know one author who, I won't say his name because it's not my story to tell, but he has made $15,000 a year on option rights for 30 years.
Oh my gosh.
Because they just keep renewing it. And he said to me, I kind of hope they never make it.
I don't know if they're willing to pay him $15,000 a year for 30 years. I would imagine that what they would pay him for actually producing the book would be significant. I don't know how that works.
Well, that's actually a good thing to kind of just talk through a little bit. So the option is, what it does is it gives them a set amount of time. And as the author, you're looking to kind of restrict that time. And of course, as the film studio, they're looking to extend that time. So typically what you will see is they will want, forever and a day, but what you're going to want to do is limit it. And it's usually 1 year to 18 months. Mm-hmm. And after that, they have the right to renew. which is obviously what's happened to that author. And
Right.
during that time, what they're usually trying to do is, one, come up with money. So if they're producers or so forth, they're going around to various people and they're trying to solicit that this is the project they should make. They're trying to onboard people. So you'll hear the term somebody's been attached to a story. So that might be a director or an actor who will say that they're interested. They may be starting the process of getting a screenplay done. So they're paying a screenwriter to do up a treatment. They'll come up with what they'll often call a show Bible or a show lookbook, which will be sort of pictures and, kind of short descriptions. People in the film industry, they have a short attention span. So most of them are not going to read your book, unfortunately. They're going to be reading a short treatment.
The picture book.
They're going to read the picture book version of your novel. So they will be doing all of that in that time period.
That's
so
awesome.
What do you get for an option? So it's really going to vary, and it's going to depend on who's optioning your book. So you will see sometimes small independent producers who will option for as little as $1. And they are just basically saying, I want to hold this. Please give me some amount of time. If you're working with a larger production company or a well-known actor, you're much more likely to see something that might be in the neighborhood of sort of $5,000 to $20,000. And that's usually a percentage of what you would then get if it was then made. So for example, if they option it for $20,000, if it then goes into production, you would get another amount, and then you would get a final payment if they actually make it all the way through. So you're kind of getting paid along the way. And usually those larger numbers are then, you're getting about sometimes 10%. So on an option of $20,000, I'd be expecting to get somewhere between $200,000 and $250,000 if it went into production.
Wow.
So that is obviously the big win.
Right.
Now, what you will see in the contracts, and I'm just going to put a warning out to people, is they'll say, or we could give you a lesser amount for a cut of the proceeds once it makes it to the screen. What you have to be leery of is that film companies have some very interesting math and that a lot of movies that are what we consider huge successes on paper don't necessarily make any money. So you're probably a little bit better to get your money up front and then also be banking on the fact that you'll be reissuing your book with a shiny new cover that has a still from the movie on it, and you'll be seeing an increase in book sales as well.
Oh, that's so cool. Well, and that, I mean, this might be a good opportunity to transition, because I've also heard that that's kind of the similar situation when you're selling foreign rights, is that often it's better to, and you can say if this is true or not, this is just what I've heard, that it's better to go ahead and get an in-front payment for the rights to your book rather than split royalties or do a royalty share over the production of your book in a foreign country. Do you know if would you agree, or can you tell us your experience with selling the foreign rights?
Well, what I would say is, and it's advice from my agent, is my agent would say, let's get some up front and let's get royalty.
Even better.
Well, I love my agent, and she thinks that way. She's like, why are we stopping ourselves there? I think whenever you as an author can get some money up front, or you need to make sure that you're very clear in understanding how the royalty split works, which is just my advice in general, is I think so often as writers, when we are offered something, we're so excited, we're so thrilled to just be at the table that we will sign almost anything without looking and without understanding. So for me, I have always done an advance plus royalties, and my royalty split is very similar to what I would see in a U.S. publisher. So in fact, I get a check ongoing that I'm apparently very popular in France. I'm like the Jerry Lewis or something. I have no idea, but I still get royalties twice a year from a publisher. And the book has been out 10 years now in France. So I'm still getting a royalty check from that. Now, I'm not, buying a house on the ocean with that royalty check, but I certainly never say no to money that comes in the mail. Absolutely. And that's actually the point I'd love to make to people who are watching this, is I don't think often enough that writers think in terms of understanding our whole industry. So there are obviously print rights, there's digital rights, there's audiobook rights, there's translation rights, there's movies, there's television. In some cases, there might be merchandise rights or even franchise rights.
Right.
So understanding all the different pieces that you have, and particularly I think things are expanding and growing. So one of the things that I'm really excited about is audiobook rights.
Right.
And there's a company that I've been using that I love called Findaway Voices, which allows you to contract with audio, the word I'm looking for, readers, I guess, narrators, that's the term. And you can do a hire with them. They will help you produce your book and help you put it up on all the different sites. And with audiobooks growing, I think that's a really under-tapped market, because for a lot of us, we just didn't ever do that. But it's possible if you're not careful, you've given away those rights.
Right, without even thinking about it. That's a good point. You know, that's, I think, such an interesting point that you bring up, because I do hear this discussion a lot with authors, and like one of the reasons that they want to self-publish is so that they don't have to give away all these rights and all this kind of stuff. But I think it's important to note that even as a traditionally published author, you have the right to negotiate the rights that you do and don't give. So,
and also being careful as an indie published writer. Look at the contract. Like if you're putting up with Amazon and you check world rights,
right,
you cannot sell foreign rights.
Oh, good. Wow. That's really important. So the global distribution gives away your foreign rights.
So you want to read that contract really carefully about whether or not you're giving away rights to sell your book in English in those foreign markets. So for example, Amazon, of course, is everywhere.
Right.
Or have you, like, just read very carefully, like, have you ticked a box that says they actually have full world rights, which would mean they would have translation rights.
Oh,
So
wow.
taking a look at that. And again, I think that's the thing where as authors, we're so excited, whether that's traditionally published, where we're just like, you like me, I love you, right? Mm-hmm. So we're so excited. Or indie published, where we're just, doing all these things. And for most of us who are, doing indie published, depending how much you're sort of putting things up and you're ticking boxes, and you may not be aware. Like I know a lot of people, have been surprised by the fact that Amazon's contract, for example, can be changed. So what you get as a royalty split, they have the right to change that and shift that.
Oh, wow. I'm sorry. It's my dog that's being naughty now. Hang on just one second. Okay. So, well, I did not realize that. So when you say that it can be changed, do you mean as in we have the rights as authors to change the contract, or do you mean that Amazon can come in at any point in time and change the contract, or both? And does that have to be done like if that were the situation, would you be notified of the change like with enough time to respond to it? Or is it like, here's our new policy and you've signed up for this, so here you go?
So I would double check, because don't want to make sure that I lead anyone astray, but they do have to give you notice. So they will send it. So you will see, and Amazon has changed terms as they've gone along. And certainly they are the ones who have really opened up the ebook market. Like,
sure.
At the risk of dating myself, my very first book that came out had no ebook rights on it, because nobody was buying ebooks.
Right.
It was like, who's going to read a book on the computer? Like, it was this ridiculous idea. And, I sold that book in 2006. So we're not talking ancient history, or at least I don't feel like I'm ancient history.
No, it's not that ancient.
So
we're all ancient.
At the time, and Amazon is a business, as publishing houses are. I think sometimes, writers, we get like, oh, they're trying to screw me over. And they're not. They're running a business.
Right.
And that's where we have to put our hats on and start saying, oh, right, I'm a business too.
Right.
Whether you're traditionally published or indie published, making sure that you understand. It would be like going into a restaurant and having someone say like, well, I don't know what the food safe laws are. I just like cooking. That's what I like. I never bothered to learn about payroll for paying waitresses. So I didn't know I had to have insurance.
Right.
It's understanding that you are now a business. And, I've heard the term, writing is a craft, but publishing's a business. Mm-hmm. And so understanding and maybe putting on a different hat and being willing to speak up. Contracts, can be negotiated. Now, they are going to be a little bit more challenging if you're a small fish and you're trying to negotiate with Amazon.
Right.
But Amazon does have things where you can change. So, for example, you can be a part of Kindle Unlimited,
Right.
but then you can, pull yourself out of that program. But make sure you understand how that works.
Right.
Like, what's the time frame you have to do?
Right.
Consider, setting yourself up, whether it's with Excel or some other kind of software, or whether you're old school like me and you just have notebooks and planners, but some way where you're tracking when are rights up for things. So for a lot of traditionally published authors, one of the things to understand is in your contract, if your agent negotiated it well, there's some clause about when your book will come out of print. And so in the olden days, i.e. before 2006, out of print meant literally what it said was that the book they were no longer making copies and shipping them to bookstores. Right. With ebooks, of course, nothing is ever out of print.
Right.
And so what you will see in most contracts is that the book has to be selling so many copies per year. Mm-hmm. And of course, as the publishing house, they want that to be as low as possible. Mm-hmm. And as the author, you want that to maybe be a little bit higher. Mm-hmm. But those rights don't just automatically revert back to you. You actually have to send them a formal letter that says, I am asking for rights reversion. Mm-hmm. I have now fallen below that threshold. I would like those rights back. And then all of those rights come back to you, mm-hmm. and you can then go on and do whatever you like. So my first book, Unpredictable, was the first book that we optioned, and it was optioned to New Line Cinema. They renewed that option a couple of times. In the course of that time period, the option expired. The book eventually went out of print. I went and reissued it, so it's now an indie pubbed title. And I myself then went forward and started talking to some producers that I had met in the process and had it re-optioned, which is where it is now, with someone who's trying to get that made.
Very exciting. I mean, if it actually happens, that'll be a really cool experience. We'll have to have you back after it's been made into a film so you can tell us about that entire process.
And I'll wear giant sunglasses and carry one of my dogs in a handbag.
That's right. That's right. Oh my gosh. Okay. So you've mentioned a couple times working with an agent. Now you said that you were hybrid. So I'm curious, I have two major questions. You can answer them in any order you'd like. So the process for someone who is an indie author who wants to sell foreign rights, do they need to have an agent? I know you can do it on your own, but I've heard it's difficult, especially if you don't know all the ins and outs. Well, let's just start there. I'll come back with my other question.
Good, because I was like, okay, remember everything. Remember everything. You can, if you are comfortable, and again, part of this depends, I think, on how comfortable an author is with the sales aspect of things. Right. You can pursue foreign sales on your own. You are welcome to go. There are two big foreign sales. So there is the Bologna Fair and there is the Frankfurt Fair. And if you are so inclined, you can go. Publishers have tables set up. You can be walking around, handing them copies of your book, talking that you would be interested in doing that. But be aware, like you need to really hustle and sell your book.
Right.
So some of that's going to depend how comfortable you are with that process.
Right.
And then second option is you could seek an agent just for foreign sales. Mm-hmm. There's two options that you can go to. So one is you could be querying traditional agents here in the North American market, either Canada or the US, and saying that you are looking for a foreign agent only. And most of them have some sort of foreign division. So they may look at taking it on. And then there are also agents who all they do is foreign sales.
Right.
Now, the easiest way to do this is have a runaway bestseller. So there you go. There's your tip of the day. If you are hugely popular,
difficult. Just write a bestseller. Just tremendous.
Just start with the bestseller. Sell that. Sell, hundreds of thousands of copies, and they will come looking for you. But that is how that will work, is they will seek you out in that particular situation. But you can go to someone with sort of just a foreign deal only and say that you're looking for foreign rights sales. What you have to understand is for a foreign publisher, there are some additional expenses because they are the part that is paying for translation. So you are not paying for that service.
That's nice.
So they are paying for that. So for them, they're really going to be trying to think about, what's going to make this sell in their particular market. So again, if you were doing this on your own and you really wanted to sell in Italy, because I want to go to Italy, so I'm sort of put that out there. You want to sell in Italy, knowing what books are selling there. So you can say, like, I know, the Italian bestsellers have included, et cetera, and my book is in that same genre, but it's different in this particular way, is a way of intriguing them. So, and I actually have no idea at this moment, but let's assume for some reason that you've written a fantasy novel and fantasies don't sell in Italy. You're kind of wasting your time and energy there because for them, they're probably not looking for that. Again, unless you've written the next Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, where suddenly they're going to be like, yes, we do want that.
Right. Well, that leads me to a question then, and that is, how does someone do that kind of research on what's popular in other countries?
It's as simple as, to some degree, getting out your friend Google and kind of
Always
going
Google.
when in doubt, Google, and sort of looking at what is selling in particular markets. I keep a lot of eye on England because, one, I love a lot of English books. So one of my favorite thriller writers is a woman named Liz Nugent, and she's hugely popular in the UK. She did a book here, Unraveling Oliver, which was fairly popular, but she hasn't had the same level of success. But if you read her book versus something like a Gone Girl, you'll sort of see just a few differences. And if I was talking to the UK market, I would use Liz Nugent as a comparable versus, strangely, Gillian Flynn.
So that leads me to what I feel like is a dumb question, but I want to make sure that it's answered. And that is the UK considered a foreign market? And do you sell specific rights to the UK?
Yes. So if you look at contracts, you will see, again, always look at what you're signing. So you might sign something that says World English. And World English would include the UK. It would include any place where, and I'm trying to think, there's some like weird province of some weird place where English is their first language, right? So it's, any place where English is listed as the primary language, then you are selling there. But otherwise, the UK is a foreign market. And for example, not only am I a hybrid author, I'm a hybrid citizen. So I'm both American and Canadian.
Oh, wow.
And one of the interesting things is I have sold in France and I have also sold into the French-Canadian market, and they're considered two separate markets. And if you've ever tried to speak your high school French in Quebec, you will know that they consider it two very different languages.
Yeah, I'm sure. Oh, that's interesting. I never even thought about, you just assume you're like, okay, but if you think about just Amazon on itself, Canada has its own Amazon site, and yeah, you can really get bogged down into trying to figure all of this stuff out. Okay, so let me recap just a little bit here. So if you were trying to do it, let's just talk from the view of finding an agent, because I think that's going to be the easier route for most people. So you would go out, find an agent who does foreign rights exclusively, do your research, because not only, it's just like selling a book to a traditional publisher in the fact that first you have to sell your agent, and then you have to sell, so you have to get the agent first, and then they will, because most of them work on commission. Is that correct?
I'm going to be really clear on this part. They should only be working on commission.
Okay, good to know.
No money should you be paying other than they take a percentage of your sales. So,
but that's super important to know and understand, because that means they're going to be very choosy about the books that they take on.
Yeah, they're very choosy because they are often spending a lot of time / money for them, trying to build you up so that they can make money from your book sales. So they are going to be selective. And I also compare it to, I don't know about you, but I read a ton. And if you asked me about, I think last year I added it up, I read 86 books. And if you said to me, out of those books, I read constantly, if you said to me, out of those books, which ones did I pick up the phone and call someone and say, Alexa, you absolutely have to read Liz Nugent's Unraveling Oliver. It was amazing.
Mhm.
There's very few. There's a lot of books that a week after I read them, I almost don't remember
Right.
them.
Right.
So what you're trying to do is convince an agent not only to have that kind of love for your book, but to call someone and say, why don't you give me $30,000, $100,000, $300,000 for this book? I
Right.
mean, it has to be a true love and a passion for them. So I would say to people, I think querying agents is sometimes almost the most discouraging part of the process,
Yeah, I'm sure.
because you get a lot of almost where people will say, I really liked it. It just wasn't for me. I don't think I can take it on at this time. And people take it like nobody likes my writing. And
Yeah.
it's not that. It's
Yeah.
just, do they have this thing where they are already itching to pick up the phone and basically let me call someone? I know I can sell this book. I know I can. Like,
Yeah.
that's what you're looking for.
I know I never went all the way through the process, but I had started off talking with an international rights agent. And she first of all, she had a phone conversation with me. She was very open about just having the conversation. And the book that we were considering is it's a children's book written in English rhyme. And so her biggest concern was that it would be really difficult to produce the same effect of the storyline translated. And that's something you have to think about too. Like, is your book even can you translate a rhyming
Yeah.
book and still have the same effect? But we had a great conversation, but she was very, like, some of the questions, she was very concerned about, like the number of sales that had already happened in the US market. So I think these are things I've never actually gone through with an agent, but I would guess, to your point on um, the fact that they work on the commission and the fact that they have to go convince somebody else to pay to have the book translated and promoted and marketed and all these things in a foreign market, they're going to want to know, is your book selling? And if your book's not selling in the US, why would you think it's going to sell in France or in Germany or China? And, so do you have any to add on that? Anything to add on that?
I would say you're bang on. Like, and just for people to remember again, that's not a reflection on whether or not you wrote a good book.
Right.
That's a reflection on the market. And it is a challenging thing because, I've had experiences where I've had books that have done really well with sales, and then had another book that didn't do as well, and trying to figure out, why did that happen? I might even like the other book better, or think like, it's a better story. But there are so many market forces that are at work. And that's why I think, keeping track of what you've written, where it is in the process, whether or not you have rights or don't have rights, and constantly doing things like this summit where you're educating yourself, because our business just keeps changing and evolving.
That's for sure.
And you need to, sort of stay on top of those things, whether that's, through something like this, or you belong to something like, the Creative Academy that I'm a part of, or, things where there are opportunities to talk to people and understand, what's happening with audiobooks. Oh, wait, I didn't know you could do an audiobook on your own. Like, how does that work? And what are the costs for that? And really starting to think through terms that we don't think of with writing, like return on investment,
Right.
and all of those types of things. But those are the publishing side.
Yeah. Well, then let me ask you another question. As a traditionally published author, at what point in time do foreign rights conversations come up? Are they part of the initial package, or do they too also wait to kind of see how the US market goes before they start pitching it to other countries?
You'll see it happen both ways. So one of the things you need to understand is the first thing that your agent will be negotiating with the publisher is, does the publisher retain foreign rights,
Mm-hmm.
which is they have the right to sell it. You still will get money. Like, it's not that they get the money.
Right.
So I'll explain that in a minute, or whether or not you retain the foreign rights. So we're going to make this easy on me because math was not my subject. So we're going to say a publisher is going to give you a $10,000 advance. And that your royalties are $1 a book.
Okay.
I told you we were going to make this easy.
Yes, very easy.
So what would happen is you would be getting that advance, which basically means in advance of the book coming out. So you have that money. You would never have to pay that back.
Okay.
but you'll hear the term earn out. And what that means is after you've sold 10,000 copies, you have earned out. And after that, the publisher is paying you $1 per book for every book after that.
Okay.
Now with foreign sales, how that works is, let's say that the publisher has retained foreign rights. So they gave you an advance of $10,000 and they sell the book in France for $5,000.
Okay.
That $5,000 first goes against your advance. So now you would only need to sell 5,000 books before you're earning out.
So it would still be $1 per book then, regardless of what market it was selling in, essentially.
Well,
right?
There might be a different royalty rate, but the fact that they got an advance of $5,000, that first is going to go against the advance they've already paid you.
Got it.
Now, let's say you have a crafty agent like mine who is very good at hanging on to foreign rights. So the publisher has given me $10,000 and my crafty agent goes and sells it in France for $5,000. I get the $5,000 and the $10,000.
Right.
So I don't have to apply it against my advance. So it's more money in my pocket immediately. Now, if you're earning out, it's less of an issue, but you may never earn out. Like you don't necessarily know. So again, that's why sometimes you're wanting to keep that. Yeah. So if you're traditionally published and the publisher wants world rights, I'd be looking to make sure, like, do they exploit those rights? Like, what are they going to do to sell it in a foreign country?
Right. Yeah.
They'll typically start trying to sell right away. So for example, my first book, Unpredictable, we did keep foreign rights on that. My agent sold that. And, just in the interest of being totally transparent, like that actually book, strangely enough, my advance was 10,000. So that's why I always use that as my starting point. That was 10,000. But my agent sold it in Germany before the book ever came out for $40,000.
What? Okay, so let's talk about why. Hang on 1 second here. Okay, so what do you think it is then? I don't even know how to ask the question I want to ask here. What do you think it is that made the Germans so excited about this book that they would invest that heavily before any proof of anything? Like, again, was it just because that's what was selling super hot on their market at the time? Is that type of story?
Unpredictable is a romantic comedy about a girl who pretends to be a psychic in order to get her ex-boyfriend back. So she is telling his new girlfriend all these predictions that she knows will hopefully split them apart, but mayhem ensues. That's basically the way to do that. And strangely enough, apparently in Germany at the time, there was a big interest in skeptics and sort of this whole idea that psychics might not be real. And they liked romantic comedies, and my agent's great. And so the next thing you know, they thought like, this is be great. And they wanted the book and we were off and running. So strangely enough, my first book, Unpredictable, I was so thrilled to get a 10,000 advance. Like, to be clear, I would have probably taken $1.
It's your first book. You're like, a publisher has it. Woo!
But it has it, right? But I actually made because we optioned that book. And again, in transparency, I got an option for 20,000 that renewed. I sold in 9 different markets. Like, I made far more money outside of the US market on that book than I did in the US market.
Wow.
And that's where I think people, they leave money on the table because we tend to think of ourselves as that. And I even looked this up. So IPR License is the group that kind of organizes a lot of the foreign book events and so forth. And they did a quiz, and I actually looked this up. I have stats. So 47% of authors admit they did not know or were unsure if they owned world rights to their book.
Wow.
And only 13% of respondents had licensed their work to an overseas publisher. And 28% of authors didn't even know when they did or didn't have the rights to license.
Wow. Well, but from a self-publishing side, I totally get this, because it's intimidating enough just to learn the process of getting your book published on Amazon. Then
Yes.
you start learning that, oh, you should have done it in Ingram Spark, and you should have done it through this wholesaler, and you should have tried to do this, and you should, so yeah, I completely understand it. And I would say this is one of those elements where I feel a strong pull towards why traditional can be such a great, and I don't necessarily mean like the traditional publishing house, but the traditional route of having an agent and then moving forward that way, because they do know these things. They know the ins and outs of it. I mean, I've published 40 books and I don't have international rights on any of them because it's been something that's so intimidating to me. I don't even know where to start. So I really appreciate your transparency in this very, very open conversation, because it gives me hope that what I really just need to start with is picking up the phone and calling someone and selling my book to them, the agent.
And I think it's a reality. Like, I think it's human nature now because we're online all the time, and it's like this huge thing scrolls by, and like you just scroll past and hit, I agree. And then you go on to the next thing.
Right.
We're not reading. And, I have a lot of faith that, a lot of us are very smart women and men, and not to give them discredit,
right.
But, take time, like sit down, look at, what you're signing. And if you don't understand it, there are amazing resources online. And, don't be afraid to reach out and, talk to people, educate yourself. If you happen to be at a conference where there are agents, take a pitch session with them, talk with them about foreign rights. Google is our friend. And, again, I was looking stuff up because I wanted to make sure I didn't misspeak on today's interview. So, it's just reminded of a lot of things where it's, it breaks down parts of a contract for you, where you can go online and it says, this is what this means in a contract. This is what that means.
Yeah.
And taking the time to do that. So, what I would say, like my big take home for writers out of this is there are markets I'm willing to bet you haven't explored. And, checking those out is well worth it. Making sure you understand what you've signed and for how long that holds for, because you may find yourself in a situation where, you know what, at this point, I just want it up on Amazon. I'm just doing Kindle Unlimited. I'm doing all that. Right. But then understand those usually just roll over unless you interrupt that. So you need to have, on your calendar, this is when that expires, and then make some decisions. Like maybe I don't want to be in KU this time. Maybe you do. Right. But so that you're on top of it, because you don't want to find yourself in a situation where you can't do something because you didn't pay attention to it.
Well, and it also makes me wonder, like with a lot of the sites like Kobo and BookBaby or Publish Drive or any of these other organizations that are out there with the intent of distributing your book for you. I don't know that I've read very closely to see, because I know a lot of them distribute into foreign markets, as in like the Chinese market, but they're not like translated, all that stuff. It's just available for sale there. But it makes me wonder, if that, what the rights are in terms of distribution. Most of those types of sites never go exclusive because you're allowed to put your book pretty much anywhere. However, obviously if Kobo is distributing it to Amazon, then you can't be doing it through Publish Drive to Amazon. You can't be direct, all those types of things. So I think it's a great point that you just really do have to take the time to read through and figure out what you're signing and all of that. But it's also super interesting to note how much money you can make if you have a really good book and you know that that type of book is doing well in a foreign market. How much money you can actually make by trying to sell it to those markets is incredible.
Well, and I think the difference maker for me from being, a day job person writing and, kind of slowly I went to part-time and then eventually to full-time, was exploiting sounds bad, but it's me, but exploiting the full range of things. So thinking about audiobooks, film rights, royalties coming in. When, if something's not selling, get the rights back, let's indie publish it myself.
Right.
Thinking about having those different streams of income is what's going to help you sort of make that difference. And if you're confused and you're lost on that, something like this summit is huge. looking whether or not if you're, want to take an online class, do something like the Creative Academy, where there's people who are, available to talk to who have done it and can kind of coach you through what you might need to know.
So the Creative Academy is new to me, so please take a moment to tell us a little bit about it. I'm not familiar with it.
I love it. So when we have a free resource room, so anyone, if you just go to, I think you have the website, it'll be up there, but it's CCS Creative Academy. You can go up there and we have a free resource room, which is just free. But we also have a membership model. So there's 3 of us, myself, a person who, Crystal CJ Hunt, and Donna Barker. So Donna Barker is a coach. So she's the one who's going to make sure your butt is in the seat. She's the accountability girl. I'm the craft person. I'm talking writing. And Crystal is a very successful indie published romance writer. And she used to be a publisher. She used to run Gumboot Books.
Oh, wow.
So we each have weekly office hours where we answer people's questions. So people can come in. It's similar to this. We actually use Zoom. So people can ask questions. We have master classes. We're doing interviews. So we interviewed, for example, my agent, Barbara Powell, and she answered people's questions on different things. We did something with Find Away Voices. We've done something with some other different groups. So we're bringing in people to sort of talk and get their questions answered. So it's meant to be an online community where we have hopefully a lot of fun, and also people can pick each other's brains. So there's we have people who are New York Times successful Hugo Award-winning authors who are members, and they're also there and able to answer questions for people too.
Well, you've given us a lot of information about something that I was completely not knowledgeable at all. So I really thank you for that. And we will make sure that everybody has all the links. Do you have any final takeaways or tips or points that you want to make sure that people really, really have on the top of their brain as we leave this conversation?
I would say the biggest thing is remember that there are 2 sides that you're going to be. You're going to be your author side, which is going to be your creative side, and you're going to have your business side. And don't be afraid to be a business person. Your art has value. You are not money grubbing to want to earn money from your art. What you are is a business person. So wear that proudly.
Yes, I love that tip. Thank you so very much. I appreciate everything that you shared with us. And this was phenomenal. And now I need to go looking for agents.
All right. Have a great day. Thanks so much for having me.